Who really needs an electrical socket? Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Static Shock. A typical nerdy high school student with a passion for science and pop culture, Hawkins' life changed dramatically after he was caught up in a local gang war and was doused with an experimental chemical that contained a mutagen agent. This led him to gaining a variety of electromagnetic powers, and as a big fan of comic books, Hawkins decided to use his powers to clean up his community and save the innocent. A fun, humorous individual in his normal life, these aspects of Hawkins' personality shine in his superhero persona as well, and Static is well known for his witty banter and good-heartedness. You have to wonder if this guy uses a lot of dryer sheets to prevent his clothes from sticking together. Before we get a closer look at Static Shock, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample that we're about to have a look at in this video. Grabbing the tape measure, we're going to take it right to the very top of his head, starting first with inches. Static Shock stands just a little over 6 inches. He's probably about 6¼ inches in height, and that works out to be a figure that's about 15½ centimeters tall. And then to grab a figure I thought was of equal size, we're going to slide over Static Shock and bring in the DC Rebirth Batman. Static Shock does have a trench coat. Batman does have himself a cape. And if you don't count the tops of Batman's cowled ears, then they're all almost about the same size and about the same build to one another. I think this also marks the first time that we've gotten ourselves a DC Multiverse figure that came included with a black display stand. Let me finish. I know there's lots of figures that have come included with black display stands, but I think this is the first time a black display stand has been in the same tray as the figure itself. Usually they're always in the back card along with the trading card, but this is the first time, I think, that we've gotten ourselves a black display stand with the DC logo branded down below. That was part of the same tray that came included with the figure. Maybe? Possibly. Gonna move that to the side. Because the one other thing that was in the back of the card, probably one of the reasons why they had to put the tray into the front, they moved it to first class, was because also he comes included with this hexagonal display stand that's made up of slightly smaller hexagonal shapes that are all connected to one another. You can see it forms a ring, and then there's at the top there's actually a peg, so it can still attach to his feet. In the opener of this review, I actually had the figure with his legs stretched across from one end to the other. It's a simple enough display stand. Probably could have used a little bit of extra color, but at least to its credit, it's molded on one side and molded on the other side as well. Of course, the only one side that you're going to be concerned with is the one that has the peg. But I like the fact that at least they included that. The figure, of course, also comes included with a trading card. And in this case, they have used source material. It's not granted the same image. It's not the same costume as what we're getting here. But I hope at some point we actually get this version of Static Shock as a figure. Hopefully they make that happen down the road. This is Static Shock, by the way, from the new 52. And again, you can see his costuming and his face is a little bit different. He also has the goggles on the top of his head. I hope we do get this figure at some point. On the back, though, his real name is Virgil Hawkins. I didn't mention that at the beginning of the review, but what I did mention, though, is this paragraph, a good meaty paragraph at the beginning of this video. So you can either pause and read it for yourself, or you can simply just listen to me read it at the very beginning of the video. I like to do that. It's a service I'm more than willing to provide. Going to move that to the side. I'm going to add that to the rest of my trading card collection. The figure also comes include a couple of orbs of electricity. They're not the same, but they are, of course, ones that you can attach onto his arms. There's no real rhyme or reason as to which way you actually attach them. Because he also does have closed fists, it makes things a little bit easier for them to be slid over top. Now, there's a little kind of pocket on one side. I'm sort of using that as an aid to attach onto his hand, so it really does hold on like a cuff of a sleeve. The other one, literally, you're just going to, again, just fit it around his hand. Again, there's no real rhyme, there's no real reason, but this one does seem like it actually is fit more like a glove. I like the way that they've actually got that is included with the figure. There probably could have also been opportunities where they could have had some spiraling electricity that they could have had wrapping around his legs, for example. But I have a couple of those also for Flash from previous figures, so I probably could even just use those, as they're not really being used for figure right now. Let's go ahead and remove those. We'll put those to the side and get a closer look at Static Shock. It's a nice looking figure. One thing I will tell you, though, is that they have used a darker plastic. And in many of the cases, when they have used like the yellow, for example, they've painted it, I'm guessing, over top of the plastic. So there are some little areas on the figure that aren't as bright as I think they could be. Like, for example, his logo here on the front is a little more faded. It probably could have used another coat, maybe just a cleaner coat of paint added over top of it. Because, yeah, there are some areas on this figure, admittingly, that are a little bit more faded. They probably could have used. Like, even on his sleeve, for example. Not as bright of a yellow as I would have hoped. Head sculpt is good. I do like they gave him at least a big smile. He does have himself goggles, but the goggles are not removable. Again, I hope we do get ourselves like a gold label version of this guy with a slightly different head sculpt. But I do like the head sculpt overall. He has long hair, as you can see, and it looks like they've also painted in possibly 2 colors of brown. It seems like it's a little bit lighter up here and a little bit darker down below. It could also just be my eyes playing tricks on me. That's what happens when you get a little bit older. I do like the way they've at least outlined the goggles in a darker yellow, keeping the more lighter yellow on the inside of it. The yellow also carries over to the cowl piece that he has on the side of his face. It is not, again, the brightest that I think it could have possibly been, but still it's a good looking head sculpt overall. Now he's again wearing a trench coat. The trench coat is a separate piece in the sense that you can lift the bottom tail from it. But you can see, I don't know if you can actually see or not, but it's actually pegged to the inside on the top of his torso. At least they did use a softer plastic. It certainly will come in handy when it comes to moving the legs, for example. The trench coat isn't going to get in the way. This guy pulsates with bright colors. Again, I like the way they've sculpted the figure, but there are, yeah, admittingly, there's some few little areas like where the yellow isn't, I've already mentioned, as bright as it probably could be. Like his hands, for example, isn't quite the same yellow, for example, as the yellow that's just below it. Now, this has likely been molded in yellow plastic. I'm guessing this was likely painted in yellow. So again, like the colors aren't 100% jiving, but they are still pretty close, though. I overall do like the look of this figure. And Static Shock was, for me, one that I always watched as a kid. Static Shock was a cartoon I really liked because every once in a while you'd have members of the Justice League making appearances. I think John Stewart was one that I always remember the most, being the one that always appeared every once in a while in a Static Shock episode. I always remember recording those episodes and then watching them a little bit later on. But for the articulation here for Static Shock, we're going to start first with his head. It does rotate all the way around, even though he does have a higher collar, which actually is attached right here. So while you can move the bottom of its trench coat, the top of his collar is pretty much permanent. You're not going to be able to move that around, but at least it's softer plastic, so it does allow the head to rotate easily all the way around. The head can look up only to about there. The head can also look down quite a lot more, and you can also rock the head back and forth as well. Shoulders comfortably come out at a 90-degree angle bend. You can also take those same arms and rotate them all the way around. He has a swivel at the bicep section. It's really almost even hidden there, the way the coloring of this is so dark that you almost don't even see that there's actually a joint right there where you can swivel the bicep, but it is there. Figure does have also as well a double hinge on the elbow. The hands do rotate all the way around. I do wish kind of that the figure could have come included with more than just fists. I mean, fists are fine if you want to have them displayed with those electricity parts you can attach over top of the hands, but I wish the figure could have also come included with maybe relaxed hands also. The figure has an upper torso ball joint. The figure also has a double hinge or double ball joint, so at the top, and then he's also got one at the bottom here that's actually just below his pants. Now, his pants are a softer plastic that they would have used. It helps to kind of keep things pretty seamless, but as you're certainly rotating it around, you're going to start, I'm guessing, to probably start stretching this. But so far, it's so good. No problems really whatsoever. The figure does have a ratcheted joint for his thighs. So you can take the same legs moving forward and back. This is kind of, again, where you're seeing that softer plastic for the lower trunks really starting to, well, again, it hides the joint, but again, the more you move it around, it sort of leaves gappage behind. The figure has a slight swivel at the top of the thigh. The figure does also have a double hinge on the knee. And while he doesn't have any articulation down below here, he's got some pretty cool sculpting that they put actually into the boots as well. Now, speaking of his boots, though, when we get down to his ankles, the ankles rock back and forth this way. He does have an ankle pivot, but I noticed getting this guy to the packaging, the way that they pre-posed him in the tray, this one leg right here, this one foot I'm pointing at right now, is a little on the more warp side. This one's flat. This one's good. No problems there. But this one side, as you can see, looks a little more on an angle. So I had a little more of a tougher time getting this guy to stand. I might even see if I can heat this up just a little bit, get the leg, get the foot at least to be a little bit more flat, and you might have an easier time to stand. The figure does also have a toe articulation as well. Overall, a good-looking figure. Let's go ahead and actually bring back in that hexagonal stand, getting attached onto the top of it. This may even be a figure that you may not even need to use the black display stand with, because he does technically come included with a secondary stand. I think this is as well the first time we've gotten this stand. I'm sure it may make some reappearance if they do decide to release another Static Shock down the road. I had hoped that we were going to be getting ourselves a Static Shock sooner rather than later, and McFarlane's team does deliver one from the new 52. It's not the costuming or the look of Static Shock that I'm used to. Shock has had several different looks in the comics, and of course the way he looked also in the cartoon does bear a slight resemblance to what we actually get here in the plastic. The figure, at least to its credit, does get a very unique display stand, one of which I have not seen before with another release. The figure also comes included with energy constructs that you can attach onto the ends of his hands, and because he does have those permanent closed fists, the figure has no real tough time actually having those energy attachments going onto the ends of his hands like this. I do hope at some point, as mentioned in this review, that we do get ourselves another variation of Static Shock, maybe one a little bit closer to the one I remember, or at least one closer to the way he looks on the trading card that comes included with the figure. What do you guys think of Static Shock? Let me know down below in the comment section. Have you had the chance to pick this guy up? And were you a big fan of the Static Shock cartoon growing up? It was one of those favorites of mine. That and the Zeta Project. Zeta Project, I think, was also the one with the robot. It had some very loose ties to the DC Multiverse, a little looser than Static Shock, but I always really liked when Static Shock had guest appearances from the Justice League. Do you remember growing up and watching Static Shock? Let me know down below in the comment section. Once again, a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane's team that did provide the sample of the new 52 Static Shock that we could have a look at in this video. If you enjoyed this video, why not hit it with a like? If you're loving the content you're seeing and do want to certainly stick around for more, then make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. Popping up also at the very end of this video, if you don't mind me saying, will also be a playlist if you wanted to check out a little bit more of the DC Multiverse that I've covered, as it will be a playlist covering off the territory of all the DC Multiverse reviews that I've done, with many more to follow. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.